Reports in Yemen say southern separatists have regained full control of the coastal city of Aden. Both sides have claimed control of the city in the past 24 hours, and the situation is fluid. It comes after the separatists pulled troops from the front lines fighting the Houthis. Well, this video posted by the southern separatists shows them celebrating the takeover of major ports, but the government says it's sending in reinforcements. Earlier, its forces recaptured the airport and presidential palace from the UAE-backed separatists. Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Catherine Shakdam. She's the head of the Yemen department of the peace-building think tank Next Century Foundation, and she's joining us on Skype from near London. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera to discuss what is very much a fast-moving and fluid story in the south of Yemen. What is going on? The government said that they retook control on Wednesday after weeks of fighting. Today, Thursday, the secessionists are celebrating.
Absolutely. Well, I think realistically, it is very likely that the secessionists will remain in control of the seaport of Aden. It is, after all, a stronghold of, the secessionist movement and has been for many decades now. And I think that the opportunity that presented itself with the weakening of the Hadi-backed government and, of course, the advancement of the Houthis towards the south has emboldened the secessionists into understanding that this is an opportunity that they cannot miss. And should they do so, there will be basically the end of the movement. And I think the fact that the UAE is clearly backing that movement in this idea that Yemen should be two Yemens as opposed to one, united, has helped the situation a great deal. And of course, it's complicating things, not just for the Saudi and for Hadi government, but as well for the Houthis, because they changed their mind. They do not want to see two Yemen as they previously claimed.
There are so many questions here. Can the southern separatists count on continued support from the Emiratis? If they can keep control of Aden, what does that mean? Are we looking at going back, to pre-1994 when there were two Yemens? And also, what does this all mean for the larger war in Yemen? 4 years the separatists have been fighting alongside the government and the Saudi Emirati coalition against the Houthis.
Oh, it's a lot to unpack. The first thing I think we need to understand is that this alliance that we saw in between the Hadi-backed government and the secessionists was it was an alliance that was very weak in the sense that the only reason why Aden backed Hadi was because they feared the Houthi even more, and they understood that Hadi had no other way or other move to play, other card to play, and that he would have to then agree to some concession towards the secessionists, and that's what I think they wanted to see happen. Now that this is breaking down for obvious reason, they want to regain control of what they see as their sovereignty. And I think it's quite interesting to see how the Saudi, who claimed from the very beginning of this war to be fighting for the sovereignty of Yemen and for pro-democratic Yemen, are now sitting once more on the wrong side of history, in the sense that we have to admit that if we do believe in political self-determination, then the southern separatists have a case to make when it comes to claiming sovereignty over what they see as their country, their land, their nation. And the Houthi, very early on, right back at the beginning of the Yemeni revolution in 2011, made very clear that they actually were siding with the southern secessionists in the sense that they understood too what it meant to be a pariah politically and be denied sovereignty over your own land. So I think it's quite interesting now that their position have shifted, while the UAE is actually backing the secessionists for reason, again, which are very self-evident, because the UAE always wanted to have a buffer zone against North Yemen and having greater control over the waterways of Yemen and essentially the seaport Aden, because it's helping their own position in Dubai and is securing what they see as an important waterway. And I think the Saudi and the UAE will have some kind of back and forth in terms of what they want to see happen. They have very different agenda, conflicted agenda, actually. So it's interesting to see how it's playing out. And we need to look at it from within a more broader perspective, because of course the Houthi, sorry.
Absolutely, and if we do try to look at it from a broader perspective, so the back and forth between the Saudis and the Emiratis, but where does that leave the government? We had a Saudi representative, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's brother, in fact, in the US yesterday. There was talk that the government was able to retake Aden because of a possible deal. So could we see a deal about Aden, let alone the wider conflict in Yemen?
I don't think so. Honestly, John, for only one reason, is that, you know, Hadi has lost all sovereignty, all legitimacy when it comes to his presidency. I mean, he was left standing on one leg when, you know, the resistance movement in Yemen, led by the Houthi, fought the Saudi and basically obliterated his claim to the presidency. And now we're going on several years, and his presidency has ended anyway. And now the only militia or faction in Yemen that still backed him, the southern separatists, have now abandoned him, and actually even worse than that, they want to kick him out. And they have de facto annihilated his claim to the presidency. So it's you know, Hadi is now left with an empty presidential seat, with no claim to any sovereignty in Yemen. His government means absolutely nothing, both in the north and the south of Yemen. So I'm wondering now what the Saudi would do, because now they're backing a government that, in essence, does not exist anymore, not de facto. So they might claim to the legality of his presidency, but again, that would be a case to be debated, because he was elected for 2 years back in 2012. We need to remember that. It's important as far as the constitution of Yemen stands. So Hadi, I think, is gone. And now we are left with an interesting vacuum. And it's actually quite dangerous, because if we allow for a constitutional vacuum to actually take hold, you are not only reinforcing the claim that the Houthi are making over Yemen, because they are themselves de facto running the north, and the southern separatists are de facto running the south now.
Ms. Shakdam,
complicated.
It is a complicated and very fast-moving story, and we thank you very much for breaking it all down for us. Unfortunately, we'll run out of time, but thank you. That is Catherine Shakdam, live just outside of London. Thank you. Now, elsewhere in Yemen, Saudi jets have bombed a residential area near Sana'a International Airport, and that followed an attack by Houthi rebels on an airport in the Saudi city of Abha earlier on Wednesday. The Houthis say they fired a cruise missile at the airport's hangars. They have launched several drone and missile attacks on Saudi Arabia.